Well, it's time to get started. There's no better way to learn Houdini than to jump right in. So we're first going to start Houdini the way that I want to. And I'm using a Macintosh, and Windows will be just slightly different, but it's going to be the same kind of process. And I want you to learn to work like a professional works. And so everything that I show you is for you to think like you are a working professional. And so this is what will be expected of you in a studio. And this isn't typically taught in schools. And so, and I wish it was, but it's not. So I want you to get started with Houdini the way that they're going to expect you to get started with Houdini. Now, this can be a large studio, but this also works for a small studio. I do work for myself at home, and I work the same way that I work in a studio. I just don't have all the resources and the data and the drives. But my working habits are the same, and it makes it for a more efficient working system. Get more work done. So we're going to start off with opening the launcher, and I'm going to assume you've already set your preferences like I said in the video. You've already built the desktop, a technical desktop like I wanted you to, and you've already downloaded all the files and saved them in a location. So now I assume that you've saved your files, a subfolder called Viziaki-Think, and then inside there's a subfolder called HFS, and inside there's a subfolder with the different part sections in it. So I have the Houdini launcher open, and I'm working on version Houdini 20.5, and I have a file browser open. So in Windows, it's kind of called Windows folder, and Macintosh it's called a Finder, I guess. And so I have all these different folders here, and we're going to be starting in part 0 for this. So in Houdini, we start counting with the number 0. So now to open up Houdini, the latest version I have of Houdini is this 487. So I'm going to go to the launcher, I'm going to pick Houdini Terminal, and that opens this window. And this is similar on Windows. It's a little bit different on Mac, but what this window does is that it sets up the Houdini software environment to be accessed from this window. And Macintosh is using kind of a Unix, Linux simulation for these terminal shells. And Windows uses the Windows shell scripting. I don't know how to use that too well, but it starts the same way, and I've used it a lot on Windows, and I've used it a lot on Macintosh and Linux. And so when this window opens up, there's a lot of behind the things that are set up, which is why I want you to open up Houdini this way. Just don't click on the file. Don't go up here, open up part 0, and double click on a file. That is the poor way of opening up Houdini. Because if we open up Houdini from here, we get access to a lot of things. Plus, the big benefit is that we have a center base for where we're located. It's like home plate for baseball, or a goal for playing soccer, I guess. It's a place where you want to be. And so we're going to save a lot of time by not having to double click, search all through your browser over and over and over again by starting from here. It's going to save you a lot of time, and you'll appreciate it pretty quickly. And in this window, I can type PWD. I think Windows is the same. It says where we are located. So right now, we're located in the wrong place. Same on Windows and Mac. I'm going to type CD space, and I'm going to come up here to my browser window, and I'm going to drag that part 00 down here, and you see it filled in the whole path. So I don't have to type it in. Yay. And now if I type PWD, that tells me where I am, where I'm located. Now, if I want to list the files on Mac, I have to type ls. On Windows, you have to type dir. And so if you're in this folder, we're going to start with this overview too. So I'm going to type Houdini, Houdini, and then my file name. I'm on a version of Houdini called Hindi, so I have to type Hindi. Apindi jate hai. Okay. And so then I want that file name. And so on Mac, I can just type Visi 1 learning overview A 2 and get that. And Windows has a similar kind of a thing. So if I open that file, and now if there's an environment set up in this shell window, this command line tools window, those are transferred to the Houdini file. So there's all this background stuff that's going on. Think about it. And when you work in a large studio, each shot in a studio is set up to use a lot of this background information. So things get populated into Houdini that you don't even see, or you might see when you started. Houdini might look a little bit different, but there's a lot of background things that get sent in a studio. So that's why I want you to get into the habit of doing this. Okay, so this file didn't have anything in it, so I'm going to quit that. So let me open up the correct file, which is going to be overview B, basic workflow V4. So that's the file I want you to open up. So when this file is opened up, then you start to already have some things set up there. And if you set up your environment correctly, you'll see that the Earth has a texture on it and the stars have a sky on the back. And if you didn't set up things correctly, you won't see that. So red alert number 1. Okay, so now we're building a Houdini file, but there's already something in here. But I just kind of want to overview some of the things before I show you the process. Now, in this Windows system that I set up, this desktop system, on the left here, we can navigate to the different parts of Houdini just by clicking on these things. So if I go in here, it takes me inside here. And did you see that green color change on the outside? That's a color that indicates what context you're in. So this word context comes up in Houdini. And there is a context viewer, but the viewer is not the context. It's where you are in Houdini that's the context. So it's like, are you in the bathroom? Are you in the kitchen? Are you in the living room? Are you modeling? Are you setting up your render? Are you adding texture maps? Are you doing particles? Are you doing dynamics? That's what a context is. And we can see them here. If I click on this word OBJ, I get these different lists. So there's the CH, which is motion and audio. That's one of the contexts. Imaging for compositing. Materials, objects, the output part of Houdini for rendering. Shop is an old material editor. There's a few nuggets in there that you can still use. And there's a stage, which is the new Solaris lighting, LOPS. And then there's a thing called tasks. And so that's what contexts are. And there are a lot of it, maybe even call them subcontexts beyond those. And so that's what the word means. And so right now we're in the OBJ context. You can look at this as being like the root level, or not the root level, the object level, or a world space level. And so there I am. And so over here, if I click on things, if I click on this geo, that's this geo. You see it turned yellow? So I selected it here, it turned yellow. If I pick this guy here, that turned yellow. So this is a good way to see where you are, find out where you are. Now if I go into my sphere object Earth and I go out to this out, it takes me inside there. And you see it turned green. And green is the code for you're in the geometry editing mode. So this context, it's called the geometry. You can see the word up there, geometry. And that means that this is where we kind of do modeling type of information operations. But we do a lot more in here. We set up our dynamics in here. We add properties for rendering. So it's a little bit more than just modeling. It's a lot more than just modeling. And probably, for the most part, you'll be spending most of your time inside this geometry area. I have a text port down here, and this is where I use the save my files. I like to save my files here. I'll type mwrite all lowercase, MWRIT space, and that just updates my file. And right now my file is version 4. If I up arrow and then hit -I, not -1, but -I and then return, it upgraded my version to version 5. And so while I'm working, I'll slide my mouse down here and click up if I just want to save, or if I want to upgrade, I'll save like that. And so I'll do that periodically. A really fast way to upgrade a file name. You don't have to go up to File, Save As, go down to the end of the file name, click all the way over, make that sick. Save you a lot of time. Your boss will love you, and you'll be going home earlier. Okay, so that's that window. Down below here, we have the geometry spreadsheet, and that's really visible. It's visible different in different parts of Houdini. So if I go into my geometry, let's say I go back to my sphere Earth object, there's different parts here. I can look at my point positions on my sphere. I look at my UV coordinates on my sphere. I can check out my polygons, and the only thing on the left is a list of polygons, but there's no other information. And this other one called details, which has got nothing on there. But we'll use this a lot. Textport, identical to that one. But if I need to do something larger, like if I want to find out where one of my objects is located, I can just drag it down there. And this is a good point. Let's say you have a question for me. You sent me a Houdini file, and you want me to look at something. One thing I really don't like is, teacher, my file's broken, and you send me a Houdini file, and there's no explanation. And I get that a lot, and I don't like it a lot. But the best thing you can do is that describe the problem as in detail as you can. So here's my Houdini file, blah, 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 version 17, and I'm having a problem with one of the nodes. So let's say I'm having teacher, I'm having a problem with transform one node. Then you go down there and you drag that in there, and then you come down here and you use the copy paste and copy that into your email. So you send me the Houdini file, you describe what the problem is, and then you tell me where I should look. So then I opened up your file. I know exactly, I hit that twice by accident. I know exactly where to look. Now I hit enter on the keyboard there, and it does nothing because it's just the location of the file. So this error is okay. But anyway, this is a good trick if you have a problem. Now, so we have a viewport. Now we've got different viewports. I have a scene view here, and I have a camera selector. And so you can see I select my camera there. I can shade things, so I can either look at only what's inside this object. So now I'm only looking at the Earth. But if I pick show all, I see everything just like I'm up on this top level. And I can pick ghost. So now the stars is kind of muted, and the Earth is the main thing to look at. And another item here, let me go show all, is this shading. So I can bounding box wireframe, which can sometimes help your animation playback faster. A shaded, wow, too bright. Let me go to hide others there. And hidden line invisible, and hidden line ghost, and this kind of shading. I don't think I've ever used that before. That's cool looking. Wire shaded, flat shaded, and it's showing the texture smooth shaded, and a smooth shaded with wires on it. So those different shading methods are there. So I use the hidden line ghost a lot, and then of course I'll use the shaded method quite a bit. On the right here, we can display points on the geometry. Now, if you don't see that window there, don't be alarmed. It could be collapsed. See that little window? So it's a little thing, gray bar. If I click that, I can close that. There's one on the left too. Click, open, click. And on the top too, there's one that might be closed. And sometimes on the bottom, there's no one here in this case, but sometimes on the bottom there's one in certain parts of Houdini. And I can move my viewer up or down as I choose. And I have my geometry spreadsheet, my text port, and my take list. We'll get into takes later. Takes is kind of being replaced by another method in Houdini, but it's still got a lot of good uses. Get some mileage out of it. And so another part of Houdini is where do we render? So I'm going to go to the output part of Houdini, OUT, and I've got my rendering set up. So I got my render only by Earth, only my clouds, and only my stars. And instead of rendering them all at one time, now you don't see the clouds right now, for example, but instead of rendering them all at once, if I have to change something, then that means I have to re-render everything all over again. So I don't want to do that, so I'll render things in parts. And we'll get into more about that later. And when I'm finished my renders, I can go to the image part of Houdini. And we're going to use the old Houdini. There's a new Houdini compositor that comes with the software with 20.5. And it's got a lot of cool things in it yet, but it doesn't have a lot of the features that this fuller version of Houdini. It's a very different tool. Can do some very cool stuff, but it's not quite ready for prime time yet. So I'm going to be doing most of my compositing in this older composite. It works kind of like Nuke. It's a really simple, nice compositing tool. Now, the window here, we have to look at our compositing because this is images and this is geometry. So I go to composite view, and then it shows me the composite. Now this has got my background stars, my earth, and my cloud layer. I've already rendered this out the disk. And so this is where I layer them together. So for example, I pick my cloud render, and then I want to modify my cloud a little bit. I do a pre-mult, and I change the brightness of it a little bit, and another pre-mult, and then I put the cloud over the earth. I use the layer node. And then in the layer node is set to screen, which is a way of combining two pictures together. And then I want to put the earth and clouds over the stars. So I use an over to put the earth and clouds over the stars. Okay. And then when I'm all done with that, I can come down here to my comp earth and cloud stars and render everything to disk. So that's a really brief tour. One thing I didn't talk about yet is the materials. Now there's a material palette here in Houdini, and I'm going to go back to this scene view here, and I have these principal shaders. So it's just this top one, and I drag that down and I edit it. And if I go back to this window, I go back to OBJ, and I pick on my earth. Here in the render tab of my earth is where I assign the material. Now if I can click on this very right one, this floating window allows me to pick what material I want to assign to the entire object. So it's already assigned. If I want to edit that material, I click on this curved arrow jump to operator, and then that selected it. You see it's yellow. I can also hit the G key, and then it kind of homes in on that node. And so I have a principal shader earth, and I set up my basic things, no reflectivity or moderate roughness, not on there, not too much, not too little. I got textures, and so this is where my earth texture is. Now, if you have a problem with your texture, this might be where it's assigned. So if your earth doesn't show up, this is where it will be. And so remember we have that folder called Viziaki Think, and inside that folder, Viziaki Think, is the subfolder called Textures. And so what you may have to do is click on here, and it's already found that place. I'm going to hit HIP. So HIP is the folder where my Houdini file is. I can go ... That takes me up one level. ... takes me up another level. And I can go to that. I see that textures folder. Now you won't see all these same folders on your system that you will. You'll have Viziaki Think, and you'll have HFS, and you'll have textures, and you might not have much more. I have a bunch of more folders, so don't get worried about that. Go click on textures, and then there's these NASA folders. So NASA, and we have Earth, and that's where your folder file should be. So there's a couple of more things I wanted to show you. One is the UV coordinates. So on any geometry, I have my sphere. So if I look at my sphere, then I wanted to assign a texture to it. And so there's this UV texture node. And if I hit the tab key, which we'll get into a lot later, and I type UV, you can see there's a lot of UV tools. And so this is a good basic one. This is doing a polar projection, which is good for an Earth. And then I have a transform to rotate the Earth. And so let's look at units. So in Houdini, 1 unit equals 1 meter. And I typically work in units all the time. And typically 1 unit equals 1 meter. Sometimes we work in a scale of 10. So like 1 unit equals 10 meters, or 1 unit equals 100 meters, or 1 unit equals 1,000, just as long as it's consistent. But typically, the work we do in production for feature film effect, that's 1 unit equals Houdini, 1 unit equals 1 meter. Okay, and let's go down to the bottom right corner here, and I'm going to pick the global animation options. It's a far left button. And we're defaulting to 24 frames a second. So FPS, frames per second, equals 24. Some people are working in 60. Pretty fast. You're rendering more than twice the amount of frames if you're rendering frames at 60. We have our start and our end frame range, which are these outside numbers here. So this is my start file, 1000. My end file is 1100. And the inner one is, if I make this smaller, you can see the inner number changes. So if I just want to, go between a few frame range, a small frame range, I can set the inner one to be another name. These have a variable that's associated with, we'll get into more, but I just want to introduce this to you now. If I go to the output part of Houdini, select the Earth, there's my frame range, the start and end. And if I click on that, you'll see it says F start and F end. And that's these outside numbers. That's this 1000 and this 1100. That's my full frame range for my animation. If I just want to do the inside range, that's a RF start. So that's a different variable. So it's be RF start and RF end for restricted, frame range. And then we have, there's a way to play back and show audio and integer frame. I'll get into this a little bit more in the Caterpillar example I'm going to show you, what we can do with that. So we'll just close that for now. Now, if we want to check our animation, let's do a flipbook. So I already did an animation, and so my animation is twofold. One is I have a camera, and my camera has a keyframe on the Z, so the camera's just moving in and out. And my Earth has an animation at the geometry level. So if I pick here, transform, the Earth rotates. And so I just picked 2 keyframes. A cool trick is I select the node, hit the V key, and then the G key, and then I can see my animation start frame and end frame, and I can manipulate it around. We'll get more into this later. And then, so that's my animation. My clouds has an animation, but that follows the Earth. And so actually what I'm doing is I'm taking the geometry from the Earth, and that already has motion on it. So you can see that's already turning. Already has the UVs on it. I'm just using a different texture. And then I did a peak trick, which makes the sphere for the Earth slightly larger, ever so slightly larger. And not that you'll notice it, and maybe even this far from space you'd never notice it, but I just use this peak. Peak kind of expands the geometry, and it's like by, super small percent. And now if I want to do a flipbook, there's a tool here for flipbook. Now I'm going to increase the size of my viewer just so I don't get these words in there. So I'm going to go up here to this big white box with a black top, and it shows me that. I have to make sure that I'm looking at my camera. And why do I not see anything else? Okay, let me pick. So I see everything there, and for some reason I don't see everything here. That's really odd. So go pick camera one. Okay, now I see everything. And so this word views kind of gets going to be in my flipbook. If I hit the D key, it's display options, and I can turn off like the floating gnomon, which is that little corner that's getting cut off. But I can pick like node handles. I can turn off the display of things. We'll just leave it like it is for now. Just be aware that hitting the D key on and off will bring up that display window. Okay, so now if I want to flipbook this, I'm going to hit right mouse button, click on flipbook, and pick this. And it's using my restricted RF start RF end. Now, because that's the RF start, the inside number, because it's the same as my frame range, it's okay. It's fine. I can pick the size, and I'm going to pick a standard HD size. If you're on Houdini Apprentice, you won't be able to do anything larger than 1280 by 720. So you're stuck there with Apprentice. I'm going to go a little bit larger. And I picked my frame range. And so I wrote this in exactly like this. So I put in $hip, and then I put in /flip, and then I put $hip name, and then cam1 / $hip name cam1 $F4, and then PNG for a PNG file. And if you're on Apprentice, you might want to use PIC for the Houdini pick file format. You can save this as your permanent defaults. And so save as default. So you go down here and click the Save as Default button. Then every time you open up Houdini, this will all be there. And so because I'm doing a flipbook, I put the camera name in there. I typically don't, but a lot of times I do flipbooks. I have different camera views I want to look at, so then I would go in and manually change that name. So once I get this set up and I got my size set up, I generally don't use any effects, anti-aliasing, and then I'll hit Start, and it plays through, and another window will open. So this flipbook opened. It's called the MPlay viewer. MPlay is the Houdini's playing for rendered files off disk. Just 100 frames. So now I can play that off disk, and it should be playing back in real time. I can change the frame rate here if I want to. So now it's playing back at 60 frames a second. Still the same number of frames, same rendering time, just playback is different. Okay. And so this is a very brief, non-hands-on, just watch what Garman did overview of Houdini. And so from now on, in the next part one, we're going to get into you building your own files. I do have a couple of more files, things I want to show you before we exit this part 0 introductory section of the class. But you should have been taking notes the entire time, because I went through a lot of things and I won't necessarily go through them slowly again. So feel free to watch this one more time or two more times and get your notebook filled up with good stuff.